Hello everyone, I hope you're all keeping well, healthy and happy. In this video I'm going to speak about the origins of this international criminal cabal, which I've been speaking about extensively for quite a length of time now. The facts that I'm going to present in this video have been verified by law enforcement officials, by historians, by criminologists and by those who have studied intricately the beginnings of organised crime in America and in other countries as well. We're going to be touching on the subject of the Italian mafia. We're going to be talking especially about the Russian mafia, but more importantly, the connective tissue between these two, which is the Jewish mafia. Now, straight away, there are people that will find themselves getting bent out of shape by my simply saying that. Believe it or not, there did exist in America a Jewish mafia. Okay? This is a recorded fact of history. If facts disturb you, perhaps this is not the video for you to watch. And by the way, should anyone be thinking of hurling these ridiculous accusations of anti-Semitism at me, let me point out that my heritage does consist of Jewish ancestry. Okay? It is idiotic to throw that accusation at someone like me, because a Semite cannot be anti-Semitic. It's moronic to say that. That being said, there are people out there who don't understand that what we're going to be speaking about when we talk about this Jewish mafia is a small, tiny percentage of the Jewish population. Okay? Just like if we were speaking about the Italian mafia, right? We're talking about a small percentage of that population, aren't we? Just like if we were speaking about the Irish mafia, we're talking about a small percentage. Okay? And the interesting thing is, if you talk about the Italian mafia, nobody comes up to you and starts calling you an anti-Italian bigot or whatever it is, right? If you talk about the Irish mafia, no one comes up to you and says you're an anti-Irish bigot, because all you're doing is talking about facts within criminology, facts within history, facts surrounding organised crime, right? It's really as simple as that. So, again, as I say, it's idiotic to level these sorts of ridiculous accusations at anyone for simply speaking about the facts, right? But let's get into this. So, we'll start with the Jewish American organised crime factions, which emerged in the late 19th century. In the 1890s, Monk Eastman formed the Eastman Gang, which dominated organised crime in New York's underworld at that point in time. It marked the beginning of a 50-year period of Jewish American influence within organised crime. The Eastman Gang, the Lenox Avenue Gang, and later other criminal syndicates, Jewish criminal syndicates, recruited members from the influx of Jewish immigrants from the 1890s. By the 1900s, they'd graduated from petty theft to gambling and running pimping and prostitution rackets. In the 1920s, other criminal figures such as Arnold Rothstein, Bugsy Siegel, and Meyer Lansky came to power. During Prohibition, they made a fortune through these bootlegging businesses that they'd set up. Meyer Lansky and Bugsy Siegel set up the Bugs and Meyer mob, which would go on to form Murder Inc. Now, if you don't know about Murder Inc., you might want to read up on it because it's a very sinister organisation. They also formed the National Crime Syndicate, which led to a pact with the then emerging Italian-American mafia. In fact, the roots of the current Italian and Irish mobs can actually be traced straight back to these beginnings. You know that stereotypical image of the Italian gangster who's well-dressed? Well, the first person to adopt that attire, that specific persona, was Arnold Rothstein. In fact, most of the Italian mob bosses that are around today do acknowledge that Rothstein was the guy who set the tone and set the precedent for their rise. Okay? That's no joke. Now, after all of this had happened, after they'd set up these pacts and these organizations within organizations, this same criminal syndicate made massive inroads into Hollywood and Las Vegas. Okay? This is a fact, by the way. If you look at the movie mogul Lew Wasserman, who ran Universal Studios in those days, you'll find out he had very extensive links to Al Capone and the Italian-American mafia. But also, more importantly, the go-between in all of those intricate communications, shall we say, was Sidney Korshak. If you don't know who Sidney Korshak is, you really need to read up on this guy. Okay, because he was Jewish, he was part of the Jewish mafia, but he was the consigliere to the Italian mafia. Now, they also made forays into the illicit drugs trade, the pornography industry, and the child prostitution rackets. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more later on. Okay. They also infiltrated the trade unions, pressuring workers to pay dues for supposed representation. Okay. Now, the thing is that the workers did not get this representation. It was a means of extortion. It's a money racket, right? And what ended up happening was that they used this to recruit more and more people into their criminal gangs. Okay? That's what happened fundamentally. And they spread, and they still exist, by the way, only in a quote-unquote legitimized form today, right? But that's just a slice of the Jewish mafia in America. What about elsewhere? Well, in the former Soviet Union, Soviet Jewish criminal cartels built organized networks that were global in scope and size. Today they're known as the Russian Mafia or the Bratva. Okay? These very criminal elements control the modern day Russian Federation. They control Russia. President Putin is one of their puppets. Okay? This is very, very important to understand this. On a related note, by the way, what I would encourage people to do is to check out Alexander Solzhenitsyn's essay called 200 Years Together. Okay? In that particular essay, he speaks about the 1772 partial annexation of Poland and Russia, which greatly increased the Russian Jewish population. It contains 3 chapters discussing the role of a small group of criminal elites among that population. You see, it was only a tiny percentage that played a pivotal role in the revolutionary genocide and the secret police purges of Soviet Russia. Okay? As an aside, during the 1970s and the 1980s, the United States expanded its immigration policies, which allowed Soviet Jews to settle in the country, and most settled in a southern Brooklyn area known as Brighton Beach. It's sometimes referred to as Little Odessa. This is where Russian organized crime began in the US, okay? They re-infiltrated the US because organized crime got weaker as the law enforcement agency started cracking down on them. By 1983, the head of Russian organized crime in Brighton Beach was Evsei Agron, and he was known for his cruelty. He was called the godfather of the Russian-American mafia. He was born in Leningrad to Jewish parents. Agron emigrated to the United States under the Jackson-Vanik Amendment in 1975. He swiftly gained control of criminal operations among Soviet Jews living in Brighton Beach, and later what happened was that a rival organization which was expanding its own criminal operations under Boris Goldberg. Goldberg, by the way, was charged in 1989 under the Racketeer, Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, or RICO for short, for drug trafficking, armed robbery, extortion, prostitution, arms dealing, and attempted murder. Agron, by the way, the first guy we were speaking about, who controlled that region initially, died after being shot twice in the head outside his Brooklyn apartment in May 1985 at the age of 53. He was succeeded by Marat Balagula as leader of the Russian mob in the United States. Balagula was an associate of the Lucchese crime family, so again we see this merging with the Italian-American mafia, you see. So the Italian-American mafia is intricately and thoroughly connected to this. This is what they came from. Now, after the perceived downfall of the USSR, and I say it was a perceived downfall because, well, let's get into this and then you'll see why. Organized criminal groups began to openly take over Russia's economy, with many ex-KGB soldiers. So all these ex-KGB soldiers and veterans of the Afghan war started offering their services to the crime bosses in Russia. Gangster summit meetings were held in hotels and restaurants shortly before the Soviet Union's dissolution. Okay, now if you've read Anatoly Golitsyn's work, particularly New Lies for Old, what you'll have come to realize is that the so-called downfall of the USSR was make-believe. Okay, it was orchestrated by these Russian mafia bosses, which were, even in the time of the USSR, in total control of the Soviet state. Okay, and I spoke about this at length in a previous video. Okay, I talked about this. But to make a long story very short, the Vorev Zakonia basically hammered out an agreement on who would rule what. And so they set out these plans to wind down operations right across every single Soviet country insofar as the Soviet military was concerned, to feign the failure of the Soviet Union, and then to take over all the various industries inside the Soviet Union openly and blatantly. Now, it was agreed by all of these ex-Russian mafiosos, or then existing Russian mafiosos, ex-KGB agents basically, to allow Vyacheslav Yaponchik Ivankov to be sent to Brighton Beach in 1992 to take control of Russian organized crime operations in North America. Within a year, Ivankov built an international operation including, not limited to though, narcotics, money laundering, prostitution, and made ties with the American mafia and Colombian drug cartels. Ivankov's reign ended in June of 1995 when a $3.5 million extortion attempt on two Russian businessmen, Alexander Volkov and Vladimir Voloshin, ended in an FBI arrest, which resulted in a 10-year maximum security prison sentence. His successor, now this is a very, very important point, okay? So pay attention here. His successor was Semyon Yudkovich Mogilovich. Mogilovich is believed by European and United States federal law enforcement agencies to be the boss of bosses of all Russian mafia syndicates in the world. Why is this relevant to what we're talking about? Because if you look up who Mogilovich actually is and was, he was born in 1946 to a Jewish family in Kiev's Podol neighborhood. So again, this guy, he's Jewish, supposedly, right? According to the authorities. And he's the head of the Russian mafia criminal cartels, which control Russia even today. Now do you understand why Russia is the enemy? How long have I been speaking about this? Okay, do you understand why the Russian state is dangerous? Why it's destabilizing countries? Do you understand where communism now came from? And what it is, and the fact that it's still very much alive, both inside Russia and outside of Russia. The resurgence of communism, the rebuilding of a brand new Soviet Union. This criminal cartel is responsible for it. Now, I'll be including all of this information in the description, and I'll maybe post a wee comment below the video with all this information contained, depending on which platform it is. If it's on YouTube, it'll be on YouTube. VidMe, it might take a little bit longer. But you need to know this stuff. You need to know this stuff, because a lot of people out there will try and convince you, because they've got agendas, because they're actually working for the SVR, which is the intelligence arm of the Russian state. They want to try and convince you that Russia are the good guys, that Alexander Dugin is a good guy. He's not. He's part of this whole damn thing. Bolshevism, right? The so-called new right, or whatever the hell else they're calling it, which is being manufactured by these same forces, right? It's similar to what David Icke talks about. Problem, reaction, solution. They create the problem, they create the reaction, and then they present what appears to be a solution, which is to join the Russian state. But really, what you're actually conceding is that, well, you're basically giving up your freedom to live in an enslaved state. So keep that in mind. Okay? Anyway, I think that'll do it for this video. Because I've given you enough information to digest, I think. But as I say, all the various names for further research will be included. All the any details I think that are important for you to know, so that you can go out there for yourself, research what I'm talking about, and you'll see it is absolutely plainly the truth. Okay, everything I've been talking about has been absolutely plainly the truth. Okay? Anyway, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video. I really do appreciate all your support and all your efforts. You guys are awesome for the absolute strength you have shown and the willingness to learn that you've shown. That was something I wasn't expecting when I actually started the channel. I have to be honest. I thought I'd have at most one subscriber, and that I'd probably have to put up cat videos. But thanks to you guys, that has not been the case, and people have been very, very receptive to learning. So that in turn actually gives me the motivation to keep working, to keep going. So I do appreciate your support, both on YouTube and on Patreon and across other platforms. Thank you so much. Take good care of yourselves, and God bless every one of you.